We could give it a shot, why not?
Under the water there are traps. Old cars, bedsteads, weaved, hidden depths. It's the perfect place for an accident.
On the 29th of June 2025, a group of teenagers ventured into the Miriam River in Bacabal, Brazil, for a quick morning swim. But after several minutes in the water, the group started to realize that one of its members, 13-year-old Raisa, was no longer beside them. And after calling out her name and searching the surrounding area, the realization set in. Raisa had disappeared. It was now likely somewhere in that murky water around them. The news sent shockwaves throughout the community, and straight away locals filled the area to help find this girl. But their attempts were all futile. And with each passing moment, it grew more and more likely that Raisa had tragically drowned.
Guys, it's called The Darkest Moments in TV History 7. We always watch these.
With the search efforts shifting to recovery efforts the next morning. The tragedy led to various news stations arriving on the scene to help document the search, and for one reporter, Lenildo Frazao, he couldn't help but view Raisa's story as a cautionary tale. The Miriam River is particularly unassuming from the surface, which is exactly what made it so dangerous, since it carried with it an unexpectedly strong current and a bottom that was littered with sudden drop-offs, as even in shallow sections, one step could plunge you into deep water without warning. As a result, tragedies like this had sadly happened here before, and for Lenildo, this was the perfect time to highlight the river's dangers, in the hope of preventing one from ever happening again. And he had a unique idea to help achieve this.
Oh no, he's gonna do it himself.
Rather than just explaining how dangerous the river was, Lenildo wanted to demonstrate it. And so he began to take off his shoes and his pants before entering the water, with his microphone in his hand.
But what's the point?
Foi justamente aqui, pessoal. Nós vamos entrar agora na água aqui para mostrar para vocês o local. Olha, a gente já vê que aqui a água é
Wait, in
muito
full
forte.
clothing?
E vai descendo, ó. Vixe Maria, vai descendo aqui, viu? Ó.
The camera rolled as he waded into the river, at first going just to the depths of his knees, before the riverbed began to drop beneath him, sending the water all the way up to his chest.
Então, pessoal, e aí tem a correnteza. Aqui já, olha, ó, passinho para frente, a água já tá praticamente.
And all while this happened, he spoke to the viewers at home about how unsafe this area could be, especially for unattended children who weren't strong swimmers. But even with most of his body now submerged, he wanted to take it even further in order to prove his point. And so he continued wading towards the center of the river, right in the direction of the noticeably fast-moving current, until suddenly...
Olha, dei pouquinho aqui, ó. A água já tá acima do meu peito, para você ver a situação. Se eu andar pouquinho aqui, deixa eu ver aqui. Ó, vou andar mais. Ó a fundura aqui, ó. Ui.
Lenildo physically recoiled and let out a loud yell. He stood there for a moment, anxiously glaring into the water, before telling his crew, "I think there's something down here underwater." Whatever he had touched in those murky depths didn't seem natural, with Lenildo describing it as being soft. And quickly, he made his way back to the shore, where he further explained why he was so shaken by the ordeal, admitting that what he stepped on felt like an arm. This is the exact moment that many believe Raisa was found, as just moments later, several locals would retrace Lenildo's steps and discover the 13-year-old's body in the same exact location. Raisa had died from an accidental drowning, as she wasn't a strong swimmer, and had likely fallen into the deep water where she was held down by the current. The exact conditions that Lenildo had been warning the viewers about.
Oh, that's fucking
when he
scary.
unknowingly stepped on her corpse, with the entire ordeal culminating into what can only be described as one of the darkest moments.
Dude, people probably thought this guy was like baiting or something like that, or fucking like faking it for the cameras. Like, people probably got really mad at him and shit.
Television history.
How far and what lengths have you gone to find these plants?
Because that's like a 1 in a billion, like actually.
Individually, they're just like you and me, but together they are a source of endless fascination.
And we'll conduct a rigorous scientific experiment into twin telepathy.
Take care out on the street. Use your head and then your feet.
It was a peculiar sight. As traffic flowed through one of the UK's busiest roadways, the M6, CCTV cameras captured two women walking down the narrow median, with a vehicle speeding past them on either side. These women were Sabina and Ursula Eriksson, 40-year-old identical twin sisters who grew up in Sweden, with Ursula eventually moving to the US and Sabina to Ireland. Just one day before this footage was taken, on May 16, 2008, Ursula had made the long flight to visit Sabina at her home in Dublin. But things got off to a troubling start when Sabina got into a verbal altercation with her husband and the father of her two kids, prompting both sisters to leave the house in the middle of the night without telling anyone. The next morning, the sisters emerged in the city of Liverpool, where they visited a police station and reported that Sabina's kids were in danger and were unsafe in her husband's care. Law enforcement briefly looked into the matter, but ultimately they didn't seem all too concerned with the children's well-being, and rather they seemed more troubled by the women themselves. Their behavior was just somewhat off, so much so that shortly after leaving the station, they were kicked off a public bus for exhibiting erratic behavior, which some passengers found threatening. And after the altercation, this erratic behavior continued. As for unknown reasons, the pair began walking towards the M6, and then eventually right onto it, where we see them now. It defied any sort of logic, and put them in an extremely dangerous position, a position where one wrong move could lead to a horrific accident. And sure enough, that's exactly what would happen, though it was anything but accidental. Without warning, both women turned and then ran directly into the road, and for Sabina, directly into a car traveling in the fast lane. Immediately, local police were inundated with urgent calls about the ordeal, leading to a group of officers being dispatched to the scene, and coincidentally, the same group just so happened to have a camera crew following them as part of the show Motorway Cops. The show follows traffic officers as they handle their many daily encounters, ranging from mundane traffic infractions all the way to devastating tragedies. And this segment seemed destined for the latter.
Dude, really, man?
The fastest lane of the motorway. Anyone being hit, you're expecting serious injury.
These guys need to choose their content better. I gotta keep it a buck. Bro, something this bad with what the kind of attitude that they come into this shit. Hey, come on, bro.
Life-threatening.
Come on, man, really, dude.
Despite the officers fearing the worst, however, when they arrived on the scene, they were met with a surprising sight. Standing there before them was Ursula and Sabina, who despite being struck by a car at high speeds, appeared completely unharmed. In fact, both sisters were entirely calm, as they were shown casually speaking amongst themselves as if nothing ever happened. It was a miracle. And as the officers began trying to piece together the cause of this whole ordeal, everyone at the scene began to breathe a collective sigh of relief. There was no way that any of them could have known that their roles had just been cast in one of the most disturbing television scenes of all time.
Right, what we've got is they were in the central res. They were trying to cross the Bravo, so as we approached, they hadn't seen us, Mother. The red ones got knocked down by the red car over there. I've got an ambulance en route for her. Right. She seems all right, but I'm not a doctor. She has been knocked down.
Is she the one that speaks English or the other one?
Yes. Right. The other one, she's done.
Without a single word being spoken, Ursula dashed into the middle of oncoming traffic and directly into the path of a massive truck traveling at over 60 miles per hour. It happened in a literal instant. There was hardly any chance to react, and before anyone could even begin to process what they had just witnessed, Sabina would also run into the—
Dude, poor guy too, man. That's awful. I mean, you gotta feel for this guy though. Like, he's just there to help and shit like that. And
anyone could even begin to process what they had just witnessed.
Dude, you just saw a truck go right there. Like, this is as far as that can go. Like, you go over, and then a truck like that comes in, and these guys instantly dead. What made they even try? Buddy, look at it again.
Chance to react.
Look at the feet. The massive truck right there.
And before anyone could even begin to process what they had just witnessed,
what is he gonna do? Fucking jump it? Like, oh, hell no.
Sabina would also run into the road, not after her sister, but rather straight into the path of an oncoming Volkswagen.
She's gonna run it.
Oh no! Mike Alpha, we need ambulance. Senior officers to the scene. We've got 2 possible fatals.
Within just seconds, this completely calm scene had turned to utter chaos, and both women were now lying on the pavement. Miraculously, they both were still alive. Sabina was stable but knocked unconscious, while Ursula was in rough shape. Her legs had been pulverized by the truck, with paramedics describing them as looking as if they had exploded. And while she lay there on the pavement, she was wide awake and experiencing everything. Within seconds of receiving medical attention, Ursula began to cry out,
xQc
but strangely,
juice.
it wasn't in pain. Rather, she was yelling at the paramedics, cursing and even attacking them for trying to help her.
Calm down. Calm down. Mine's very aggressive, spitting at me.
Shouting things like, "I recognize you. I know you're not real."
Come on, you've hit your head. Calm down. We are the police. We are the police.
It was clear that she was suffering from some sort of delusion, but while officers had—
Yeah, but they don't, Chad, she's not even speaking with like she even has a singular hint of pain though. I think if I had a mosquito bite, I'd be talking
their
like
hands
fucking
full
different.
trying to
It's, like,
subdue
insane.
her,
I'm
things were
confused.
about to get even more hectic as Sabina started to regain consciousness.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
She had been brutally struck by a car, as evidenced by the damage to the vehicle itself. But like Ursula, she also appeared almost entirely unfazed, as she stood up and began to scream to her sister, "They're going to steal your organs." One of the officers tried to hold her back, but Sabina resisted.
She's invincible!
Oscar Tango 3-3.
Oh, not again! Oh, no!
Eventually shoving the woman
Bruh!
into the ground, before once again taking off into oncoming traffic.
What? No! What is that?
Stay! Stay there. Calm down, calm down, calm down.
Thankfully, this time the cars managed to avoid her, but it would take 6 officers to finally restrain her, and even with that many people, it was still a struggle, as her strength was unlike anything that they had seen in a woman her size. And with Sabina now subdued, the chaos was finally over. In the following moments, Ursula was airlifted to a local hospital where she underwent an extensive, yet successful emergency surgery, while Sabina was shockingly found to have no injuries, which allowed her to be discharged into police custody after just 5 hours, where she was promptly arrested and sentenced to 1 day in prison for assaulting an officer, as well as trespassing on the motorway. And with both women now safe, one question burned at the forefront of everyone's minds. Why had the Erickson twins done?
Okay, what about 5150 or some shit? I don't get it. What about a hold that they can't say anything against? That's crazy, buddy. She literally tried to kill herself 3 times in front of them.
This. Well, the immediate theory was that this was all the result of drug use. But surprisingly, when given toxicology tests, no drugs or alcohol would be found in either of their systems. They were entirely sober during this ordeal, which left only one plausible theory, that this was all the result of some sort of mental breakdown, with both women somehow experiencing its effects at the same time. Today, this case is used as one of the most glaring examples of a psychological disorder known as folie à deux, in which one person suffering from delusions transmits said delusions onto a different person, leading to both people experiencing the same misconstrued version of reality. And while this is only a theory, it's clear that regardless of the how or why, these women were extremely mentally unwell during this event. In fact, during the TV program, an officer even mentioned that this could be a 136.
Yeah, is she under arrest about this?
Well, 136 if she is.
Which is a code that allows law enforcement to hold people on account of their mental health to assure that they're safe to return to the public. But shockingly, not only did this never happen, but Sabina was released without ever being given a mental health assessment. In fact, she was never so much as looked over by a mental health professional, and was instead released the very next day after the incident. On top of this, when she was released, she was given no information about Ursula's whereabouts or her condition, or even resources to help find her way home, leaving Sabina still mentally unwell and now stranded in an unfamiliar city, not knowing what happened to her sister. And sadly, her delusions were far from over. As she left the police station on the 19th of May, Sabina had nowhere to go, and so she began to wander, carrying her belongings in the same evidence bag that the police had given her earlier that day. Eventually, she would happen across 2 men walking their dogs, and as she stopped to pet them, Sabina asked the owners where the nearest hotel was. But seemingly recognizing that the woman wasn't well, one of the men, Glenn Hollinshed, offered to have her stay at his place, to which Sabina happily obliged. But once inside Hollinshed's home, Sabina began acting extremely paranoid, checking the windows constantly and believing that her cigarettes had been poisoned. Despite this though, Hollinshed was patient, and he helped her make calls around the area to track down Ursula, while making sure that Sabina was eating and drinking. The following day, Hollinshed was preparing dinner for Sabina when he stepped out of the house to ask his neighbor for tea, but just minutes after returning home with the bags, he would once again step out of the house, only this time, he was completely covered in blood, as he stumbled and screamed. She stabbed me. As he collapsed to the ground, the neighbor rushed over to try and help, but the damage was already done. Holinshed would let out one final soft whisper, saying, "Look after my dog for me," before breathing his final breath. For unknown reasons, in that house, Sabina had stabbed Glenn Holinshed, and by the time law enforcement arrived, she was long gone, having fled the house with a hammer in her hand, which she used to strike her head repeatedly as she mumbled incoherently and walked down the sidewalk. Eventually, a man passing by tried to intervene, but Sabina immediately attacked, brandishing a roof tile that she had hidden in her pocket and using it to strike him on the head, nearly knocking him unconscious. It would take several minutes for police to finally catch up with her, but just like the day prior, she took off, leading to a chase that ended with Sabina being surrounded on a 40-foot-tall bridge that passed over a highway, and recognizing that there was nowhere left for her to go, she jumped. Somehow, Sabina would cheat death once again.
Oh my
despite
god,
suffering 2
bro.
broken ankles and a skull fracture.
Oh my god,
She
bro.
was
I
alive.
cannot.
And after a lengthy recovery, she was put on trial for the murder of Glenn Holinshed, where she would never give a single comment as to why she did what she did, leaving her motive a total mystery to this day. Though it seems clear that it was at least partially a result of her delusions, with the defense pointing to folie à deux as a potential explanation. And in the end, it was deemed that Sabina was not mentally fit to make decisions at the time of the slaying, and ultimately, she was given a prison sentence of just 5 years. This is truly one of the most disturbing TV cases of all time, and for as shocking as it is on its own, what I find most chilling is the fact that these officers mentioned holding her for a psychiatric evaluation, which ultimately never happened.
Under arrest,
Well, 136 if she
Chat,
is.
yeah, 5 years, but did she go to like asylum for like 50 years or something like that, or what?
Massive oversight. In fact, it was so glaring that the police department allegedly contacted the show and asked them to remove this entire section. As if they had just followed through with that code 136, Sabina would have been held for longer than just one night.
Oh, she has to
which
live in
meant
the
that she not
UK,
only
which
may have been given
counts
the
as
help
an
she
asylum,
needed,
pretty much. is
but
what
she
you're
also
saying.
never would have had the chance to meet Glenn Holinshed that fateful day. Since her release from prison in 2011, Sabina promptly disappeared from the public eye, and neither she nor Ursula has ever been heard from again, meaning we have no idea whatever happened to the Eriksson twins.
They just simply tend to be making the same decisions at the same times.
Interesting, yeah.
Thinking in the same way.
I'm looking at the wiki of it. America's Got Talent, guys. I'm gonna eat 3 live grenades and
December
put a
of
fucking TNT up
2021.
my ass, guys. Here
A
it
couple
comes.
receives
Watch
a warm
this.
welcome as they walk onto the stage, ready to compete in the Croatian television show Super Talent, the country's version of America's Got Talent. But it's clear this excitement from the crowd wasn't shared by the show's host, who turned to someone standing behind the camera and flashed the unmistakable look of concern. In the minutes prior, the audience at home was introduced to the pair, 34-year-old singer Roman Bernata and his wife, 44-year-old violinist Bianca Kolompar, along with their child, who would be watching on as the two shared their musical talents with the world.
I mean, gee whiz.
In their day-to-day lives, Roman was a professional goalkeeper for a local soccer team, while Bianca was a professional violinist with a doctorate in music. And while on paper this all seems fairly normal, it was immediately clear to those watching that this couple was anything but. The two frequently went on long-winded and bizarre rants,
Man, I see
with
a lot of
Bianca
talent,
opening up about her breast enlargement surgery.
Oh.
Ja sam imala kao cura velike grudi, velika mi je bila želja da to vratim, operirala sam.
And the two discussing at length their belief in a living God who walked the earth.
Me?
Ja osjetim, stvarno imam taj kontakt sa živim Bogom i mislim da je Bog svugdje oko nas, da je Bog osoba, energija,
Istovremeno.
sve, istovremeno, da.
But it was their performance itself that proved to be the strangest part of their time on the show.
Pozdrav svima.
Dobro večer.
Vi se mene ne sjećate, jel da?
Ja?
Ne. Prije puno godina.
Aha, ja se vas sjećam kad sam snimala s
Good luck, Mr. Cam. I might be leaving, but can I still get a welcome to the jungle?
Roman's introduction was fairly uncomfortable, as he made mention of a time that he had met one of the judges years before, who clearly had no recollection of the encounter, which seemed to frustrate him, as his demeanor quickly became hostile.
Ko je vaš talent? S čim ste se došli
Ja nemam nikakav talent.
Pa šta ste onda došli?
Radit.
Ali potpuno nebitno, emisija se zove Super talent, kolegica... Alo, polako, mislim da ipak ćemo mi ovdje voditi riječ.
Leading to Roman receiving his first X before he even sang a single note.
Ako je kolegica pitala koji je vaš talent, a naša emisija se zove Super talent, a vi tvrdite da nemate talent, onda vas ja pitam pošto ste došli. Hvala.
It was a rough start for the couple, and by the time they did get to perform, things only got worse.
And now, the end is near, and so I face the final curtain.
Really?
Admittedly, the couple didn't sound awful, but it was clear the judges were frustrated by Roman's demeanor, prompting all four of them to hit their X, signaling the end of the couple's performance.
Really, dude?
Or at least they thought.
How about another joke, Marie?
I've loved and cried.
As the two just kept on performing, playing over the sounds of the judges shouting their name and the deafening silence from the crowd. With the two going until a producer finally had to step in from behind the camera and officially cut them off. But even then, the couple continued their antics, this time by protesting the judge's decision, with Bianca even threatening to go to the newspaper and expose their behavior to the press, all while Roman stood angrily to the side, glaring at the panel before him. And with that, Roman and Bianca's time on Super Talent was over, and they not only walked away without receiving the grand prize, but they also left with shattered reputations, as this segment became notorious among fans of Super Talent, with the couple being considered one of the most unusual acts to ever feature on the show.
Yeah, but this is... Bro, that was the blueprint, though. Nah, people, you're not gonna rewrite the history, okay? This is the most content that they've got, and they've had that as like their main content for fucking ever. Okay, they love that shit. They say, oh wow, this is so odd. I cannot believe this happened. They love that shit. Come on, man.
But despite its virality, this performance isn't what Roman is most widely remembered for today. On February 6th, 2022, residents in Rijeka, Croatia were met with the sight of a fully nude man wandering the city streets. It was Roman Bernata, and while most stared on in amusement, laughing to themselves and snapping photos, what they were witnessing was actually one of the most disturbing events the city had ever seen.
He went full Lil Nas on this one.
After his disastrous performance just one year
went full
prior,
Hunter Biden
Roman continued to pursue a career in singing, taking every opportunity he could to share his music with the world, often joining Bianca on her YouTube channel, and singing on the streets for tips, where he actually made a decent amount of money. Though because of his notorious television moment, he would often be harassed and even have the money he earned stolen from him.
Really, dude?
One day, while performing outside of a local soup kitchen, he was introduced to a woman named Darnika Krevich, a 67-year-old who relied on the soup kitchen for consistent meals. And after hearing Roman sing, she became a legitimate fan of his music, leading to the two striking up a friendship. And despite Darnika not having much, she offered to take Roman to a local coffee shop on February 6th, 2022, where she treated him to a warm cup of tea on a cold winter day. And so the two sat inside a restaurant called the Cafe Pin, with everything seeming completely normal, until a server noticed that Roman started to look almost sickly, like he could barely keep himself upright, as his body was starting to slump over the table, his eyes barely open. The server rushed over to help, but Roman recoiled and shouted, "Just try calling the police on me." And so, not wanting to escalate things, the server left, only returning later to drop off their check, which is when Roman's behavior took an even more drastic turn. He began feeling around his pants pocket for his wallet, before looking desperately around the table, but there was no sign of it. And so he grabbed Darnika's bag and rifled through it, before yelling, "You snake, you whore, where's my wallet?" Though when he still couldn't find it in Darnika's bag, his anger turned to violence, as he stood up and rushed Darnika, grabbing her by the head and shaking her, screaming in her face, accusing her of being a thief. This time, multiple people inside the cafe rushed over to hold him back, but Roman was too strong, too angry, and with seemingly no effort at all, he pushed everyone away, completely unfazed by their attempts. In that moment, no one could have stopped Roman. Darnika was entirely helpless, and so the crowd inside the cafe watched as Roman grabbed her by the neck and dragged her behind the bar, and then proceeded to kick, then stop, and then jump directly on her over and over again, each time landing on her head. It was a rage so demented that he actually began to smile a wide manic grin as he jumped and chanted, "Whore, witch, die." After what felt like an eternity, Roman stopped, before sprinting out of the restaurant, leaving Darnika entirely unrecognizable.
But they said he looked like poison almost before,
the
though.
same
What
floor
happened?
where just feet away, Roman's wallet lay, having innocently fallen out of his pocket shortly before. Outside, Roman removed his blood-soaked clothes and walked completely naked into the city center, much to the amusement of the passerbys who had no idea what he had just done, until eventually he made his way into a nearby police station and blankly stated,
Was he drugged or did he drug himself?
"I am not well." This sentiment was true in so many regards. Roman hadn't been well for quite a long time. Since a young age, it's believed he had dealt with undiagnosed schizophrenia that had led to uncontrollable anger issues, before developing an alcohol and substance abuse problem that only exacerbated his symptoms. And by the time he was an adult, Roman became so delusional that he believed he was a disciple sent from God to touch the world with his music, something that he eventually convinced Bianca of as well. So in their Super Talent episode, when Bianca mentioned their love for a living God that walked the earth, she was likely referencing Roman.
Ali ja osjetim, stvarno imam taj kontakt sa živim Bogom i mislim da je Bog svugdje oko nas, da je Bog osoba, energija, istovremeno, da.
Roman was severely unwell, and no one in his life was keeping him in check. In fact, those closest with him were only feeding his delusions, with all of his issues coming to a head on the day of the incident. And when he realized his wallet was gone, Roman rushed to assume that Darnika was the one who robbed him, perhaps as a result of having his money stolen frequently on the streets. But the sad reality was, in a sea of people trying to exploit and mock Roman, Darnika was one of the few who actually truly cared about him and legitimately believed in his talents. And yet he killed her in one of the most evil ways imaginable, all over a simple misunderstanding that was entirely his fault. In the end, Roman Bernardo was deemed unfit to stand trial and was never sentenced to serve any jail time, instead being given a 40-year sentence in a mental health facility,
There you go, that's
where
even
he's since
worse.
been described as a model patient, with his good behavior awarding him the opportunity to leave the facility for days at a time for therapeutic purposes.
What?
Nature is king here. Man can only watch
What?
and be humble.
There's nothing out there, it's your imagination.
Yo, supervision, I don't give a fuck, man. Bring the people to the facility. Why the fuck would you leave this fucking time bomb to the public? Fuck that. I mean, supervisor, no, I don't give a fuck. I don't want this shit in my fucking city. Are you kidding me?
It was the start of yet another adventure for the crew of the television show Gardener's World. This British program has been on the air since the 1960s and provides viewers with tips on how to maintain their garden while showing off a variety of unique plant life, which often brought them to remote areas of the globe. This particular episode was filmed on February 5th, 2020 in the Drakensberg mountain range of Lesotho, Africa, with the host, Nick Bailey, making the long journey to track down one specific flower.
One species which grows wild all over the country and has been a
Raw
real
garden
favourite
there.
with British gardeners for generations is the gladiolus.
This delicate flower would have been familiar with many of the show's viewers, as it was quite popular in the UK, but in this region, there existed a unique species that had only been seen a handful of times in the last century, since it only grew in one particular valley in this one particular mountain range. Its scientific name is the Gladiolus microcarpus, and there were two people who knew it better than anyone else.
That sounds like a poison.
Rod and Rachel Saunders were well-renowned botanists who studied the world of South
Gordon
African flowers in
Ramsay.
depth, with their favorite being the gladioli, as they would spend days and even months on end roaming areas just like this to learn everything they could about them, making them the perfect duo to help with the show.
Why gladioli? There's so many different plant species in South Africa you could have picked.
I think their beauty. Some of them are so exquisitely beautiful, you actually just want to sit down and cry when you see them.
But even with their vast knowledge of this region, there was always an element of danger when traversing it. Its climate is often volatile, and conditions are known to turn on a dime, making safely navigating this area extremely difficult to downright impossible. This was apparent even on the day of filming, as a dense fog had rolled in, and given the steep and rocky landscape, one wrong step could spell disaster. This didn't stop the crew from carrying onward though, as Rod and Rachel were relentless in their pursuit. They would do anything to find these flowers, And sure enough, the segment ended as they did exactly that.
We've come about 4 times looking for this plant, and this is the best I've ever seen it. It is looking absolutely gorgeous.
With that, Rod and Rachel's time on Gardener's World was over, but their journey through this area certainly wasn't. As the cameras cut, the crew made their way back to their makeshift base camp miles away, where they said their goodbyes, with Nick Bailey capturing a photo with a beloved couple and sharing it onto Twitter before parting ways, leaving the couple behind. As rather than returning to their home in Cape Town, this was actually just the start of what would be a multi-month expedition into this region, with the Nogoi Forest Reserve being their final destination. Along with being botanists, the couple were also avid seed collectors, and had started a business which shipped the seeds they had found to other plant lovers around the world. And while here, they made it their mission to find some of these ultra-rare gladioli seeds, and sure enough, on February 8th, 2020, Rod and Rachel sent a text to one of their employees at the seed mailing business, which contained a photo of the exact flower they were looking for. But despite this text seeming like a sign of more...
Isn't that kind of risky to send seeds other countries? I thought they hate that shit.
Things to come, the reality was far more bleak, as this text would ultimately be
it has
the
like
last
it's like,
the couple
when they
would
bring
ever
like
send.
fucking plants and shit.
Out of nowhere, communication with Rod and Rachel had stopped entirely, and for days no one heard anything from the duo, prompting that same employee they had sent the image to report them as missing on the 10th of February. It was a devastating turn of events, but one that was always a possibility. Poor weather, a wrong turn, an injury, anything could have derailed their expedition, as again, this area was notoriously dangerous, with it seeming all but certain that they had fallen victim to the unpredictable fury of Mother Nature, though this belief would quickly shift, thanks to the discovery of the couple's car. It was found by authorities abandoned by the edge of the Tugela River, and had been emptied of virtually everything inside. However,
yeah, I saw there's a seed bank somewhere, but I think it's having a lot of problems. No, the fucking seed bank that underground and shit like that. There's like flooding and shit in that motherfucker.
There was something left behind. As in the trunk, authorities would find a massive pool of blood.
No? Okay.
Blood that belonged to Rachel. Just days after filming, Rod and Rachel were making their way towards the Nogoi Forest Reserve, growing more and more excited by the discoveries they were making, oblivious to the fact that in the woods around them, they were being watched, hunted even, and not by an animal, but rather by a man.
But why though?
His name was Saifundin Aslam Delvicio, a local of the area that the couple was traversing, and on February 9th, he allegedly sent a text to his wife, Bibi Patel, telling her that he had found a good target, and that he was now in pursuit, with said target being Rod and Rachel.
But why?
Later that night, the couple made their camp and began to drift off in their tent, while Delvicio allegedly watched on, and once he was certain that they had fallen asleep, he made his move, approaching the tent, then tearing it open, and then standing above the couple. In the following moments, Rod and Rachel would be brutally bludgeoned to death before they could even react, as they lay helplessly, still inside their sleeping bags.
And for
Text
what?
messages indicate that Delvicio then enlisted the help of his wife Bibi, as well as his friend Musa Jackson, to help discard the bodies, using the couple's own car to transport them to the one place they were certain they would never be found: the Tugela River, as there was something about this stretch of water that they believed would make these bodies impossible to find. Crocodiles. And so they pulled up to the banks of the river as the crocodiles quietly watched on from a distance and dumped the bodies of Rod and Rachel into the water, where they were immediately devoured. They thought it was the perfect plan. However, it thankfully failed to work as well as they had hoped, as in the following weeks, fishermen would happen upon both of the corpses, or at least what remained of them, as they were in such bad shape that it would take nearly 2 full months for them to be identified. As for why this attack happened, we still don't fully know, as the trial is still ongoing, with Delvicio proclaiming his innocence, which is why everything is alleged at the moment, but the evidence is damning. Messages on Delvicio's phone paint a clear picture that he was responsible for this, with his motive appearing to be religious differences between him and the Saunders, as well as money, as after the slayings, large sums of money were withdrawn from the couple's bank accounts, along with lavish purchases being made on their credit cards, with one of the receipts from the shopping spree being found inside of Bibi's purse. The evidence is almost impossible to deny.
Yeah, I'll always be confused about this shit. Like, how can you say this? Oh, dude, fucking, like I'm sure in most religions there is something against like hoarding of wealth or flaunting or but How can you pick and choose what goes and what doesn't? Oh, this guy doesn't believe. Let's do this. And now I'm gonna do something that goes against all the things that you're supposed to believe in. Buggers.
Being found inside of Bibi's purse. The evidence is almost impossible to deny. But while we wait for justice to be served, it's important to refocus on those who won't be here to see it happen. Rod and Rachel truly did nothing wrong. They were two incredibly wholesome people who were just trying to find and connect with the flower that they loved so dearly. And while their interview days before their death is an undeniably dark television moment, it also serves as an incredible tribute, as one of the last things they ever did in their lives was share their love and passion for gladioli with the world, the flower that they ultimately gave their lives to find.
Quite a trek to get here, and what an incredible treat to see such a special plant in such a niche environment. Thank you.
Pleasure.
It's a pleasure. It's nice to be here.
Is the show okay, man? The end is near. Oh, wait, hold on. Why did they put the song? I just had it in my head now. Jesus.